Welcome to the Jedburgh podcast. I'm the creator and host, Fran Racioppi. Each episode, I speak with transformative leaders, visionaries, drivers of change, and those dedicated to winning no matter the challenge. The Jedburgh podcast is founded in the lineage of the special operations Jedburgh teams of the past and is produced in partnership with Talent War Group, a management consulting and executive search firm focused on helping you optimize the people side of your business. We're sponsored by Jersey Mike Subs. Together, we share the mission of giving, making a difference in someone's life. Visit the Jedburgh Podcast, Talent War Group, and Jersey Mike Subs on the web and on all social media. A percentage of all proceeds is dedicated to the Special Operations Warrior Foundation.
You have to fall in love with failure as an entrepreneur. You just can't make the same mistake twice. You know what I'm saying? You have to fall in love with failure because failure is how we learn. I sure as hell didn't spend another $35,000 on another suite of packaging without getting eyeball. We grow and we learn from our mistakes, but we have to fail fast and move on.
They say we're driven by our passions. Liza Huber has literally built a career on passions. In fact, Liza began her career starring on NBC's hit daytime television show called Passions. Today, she says being an entrepreneur is my deepest passion. Liza is the founder and CEO of Sage Spoonfuls, a healthy and simple solution to making your own baby food, an idea that stemmed from raising her 4 children. I've had lots of conversations on this podcast about entrepreneurism and figuring it out. But Liza's thoughts on creatively funding a business are hands down some of the best I've heard for young founders who don't want to give up equity and take on outside investors. So for this episode, I went home to suburban Boston to meet Liza in Sudbury, Mass. to cover building Sage Spoonfuls and her transition from acting to manufacturing. Liza explained the gap she saw in the market, how she started with a cookbook and some jars, and how an order from Bye Bye Baby launched the brand to a whole new level. Liza and I also discuss her son's diagnosis with cerebral palsy, what it taught her, and what it taught her family about finding solutions when he won't take no for an answer. Liza's idea for Sage Spoonfuls began with an idea in her kitchen and a food processor. Today, they're in Bye Bye Baby, Pottery Barn, Target, Walmart, Bed Bath & Beyond, and on Amazon. Liza is one of Forbes' female entrepreneurs rocking the world. And now, I know a whole lot more about baby food, parenting, and Liza's 4 lessons for building your own business. Take a listen on your favorite podcast platforms. Watch the full video version of my conversation with Liza on YouTube. Subscribe to us and follow @Jedburgh Podcast on all social media. Check out our website, jedburghpodcast.com. Learn more about Liza and Sage Spoonfuls at sagespoonfuls.com and follow them on all social media @Sage Spoonfuls and @Liza Huber. Liza, welcome to the Jedburgh podcast.
Thank you for having me.
And thanks for hosting us. This is an absolutely amazing place.
I thought that this would be a better choice than my house with 2 dogs and 4 kids. So very grateful to Nishadik Country Club for hosting us here in their beautiful bridal suite.
And we have to give a shout out to Sandra because she has done a phenomenal job setting us up.
Thank you, Sandra.
I've been looking forward to this episode, though, for a while, and my close friend and your friend Juliet Hahn introduced us, and we've been talking about how will we set this episode up, what will we talk about, and I really believe that there are 3 components to some themes that we talk about on the podcast that you are exemplifying in such an amazing way, and it's entrepreneurism. It's this idea that we have to hire for character, train for skill, and I'll get into that. And then also the fact that my son is 2 years old and he only eats junk. We have another one on the way, and there's this global supply chain issue when it comes to baby food. And so I thought we would be able to dig into these concepts. On the entrepreneurism side, it comes down to a vision. On the hire for character, train for skill, you don't have to be an industry expert if you have this vision and you have this drive and this desire to go out there, find the answer, create something, win at all costs, we talk about on the podcast, and you've done that. Just get out and go for it. And then, I need your advice. You have 4 kids.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm about to have 3. And so I figured there's a component up here where I need to learn from you through this conversation, how I'm going to get through this. But you built this brand, Sage Spoonfuls. You came from daytime TV on NBC. You've been named by Forbes as one of the female entrepreneurs rocking the world, which is a really cool title. I absolutely love that. You've been a recipient of Mom's Best Literary Gold Award, Independent Publishers Award, Parent Tested, Parent Approved Seal, Cribsy Award, and Little Flower Children and Family Services Humanitarian Award. Featured on Good Morning America, Dr. Oz, Hallmark, Parenting Magazine, The Bump, only naming a couple here. And you're in major retailers like Bye Bye Baby, Pottery Barn Kids, Target, Walmart, Bed Bath & Beyond, e-commerce. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I want to start with Sage Spoonfuls. And there's a lot we can unpack about that and all this stuff. But as I said, you're the mother of 4 kids. You've said all of them have had some sort of inspiration in the development of this brand. They were all born within 5.5 years, Royce, Brendan, Mason, Hayden. But you said after your first child was born, you knew that you wanted to make baby food. And there were so many benefits. It's healthier, tastier, cheaper than store-bought food. It helps prevent the picky eating that I talked about. I'm dealing with my son, although his picky eating is all about chocolate. But you were working full-time, and you had to figure out, how can I do this? What does it look like? Can you talk about the opportunity that you saw and why you said, this is something that I can do?
Absolutely. I mean, that baby who first inspired me, Royce, is now 15 years old.
No longer a baby.
No longer a baby. He's like 4 inches taller than me and looks like a grown man. But I mean, 15 years ago, there was still BPA in the plastics. Phthalates were everywhere. I mean, and this was in LA, where really the organic movement kind of started and then took about 3 years to cross over to the East Coast. But I did know that I wanted to make his food. I mean, we all know that fresh is best, and we're all busy. So I would often be on set on Passions at 6:45 in the morning and not be home till 10 o'clock at night. I remember there were stretches of time where I wouldn't even see Royce for 5 days, and Alex, my husband, would bring him on set at lunchtime so I could see him. So I knew that I wanted to find a system where I could make a ton of baby food and freeze it. And so, at that time we had a nanny or Alex or me when I was home. At least he was eating the food that I made for him. And at that time, all there was a Cuisinart with BPA in the plastic and these BPA flip top cube things where they would flip open, because food expands when it's frozen, and it would leak everywhere, and there was BPA in everything. And I remember thinking to myself, I was like masking, taping them closed and writing what was on. And I thought, gosh, there really must be a better way, for busy parents to provide the healthiest food possible for our children. Because if you think about it, when we're expecting, whether you're, the husband or the wife or the partner, you're investigating like the best car seat and the best this and the best that and the best that.
So true.
And the best breast pump or nursing or all of this stuff, the best crib, everything. But for some reason, it dead stops at solid food. And like all of a sudden, we're supposed to feed our children processed food.
Goldfish and Chips
every
Ahoy.
meal, every day. Even the really expensive organic baby food pouches, they absolutely have a place in our in our busy schedule. Maybe you're going to throw one into your bag or whatever. I mean, it is a convenience, but it is processed food. Even if it's expensive, even if it's organic, it has to be sterilized to have a 2-year shelf life. So that was really the idea. I thought, gosh, there's just nothing to make this very necessary thing for our children easy. And there was nothing on the market. But at the time, it was just a thought in the back of my head. I was so busy working on Passions. So I just kept my, little mini Cuisinart and my masking tape on the cubes. And it wasn't until Passions was finished and I was pregnant with my second child that I really started, thinking about pursuing it. Because like I said to you, and this may be another question I'm just kind of rolling right into.
No, go.
He was born, extremely premature. And so, and he's, what is he like? 16 months younger than Roy. So it was a lot. But when he was born super premature, he was in the NICU for 6 weeks fighting for his life. And that was just a game changer for me. So it was almost 2 years later when I first had the idea to when I thought, this baby needs me. This is my record scratch, life-changing moment. So I'm actually going to take some time to develop this.
So I want to ask you about your son as well, Brendan.
Brendan, right?
Your second child, because he was born. He spent 6 months, right? In the
6 weeks.
6 weeks.
6 weeks. Yes.
In the ice in intensive care, and was born with cerebral palsy.
So it's so it was a very interesting road. So the point was just to keep him alive, of course. And being born at 31 weeks, and at 4 pounds, 10 ounces, I mean, you should be okay. He was supposed to just be there for 2 weeks for observation. But his lungs just were not ready. His lungs were just not ready. And I mean, he coded twice and it was just very scary. But because we had a placental abruption, and of course we learned this along the way, the physical therapist in the NICU was like, he feels a little bit tight, but unless you're born very severely affected by cerebral palsy, which most kids are not. I mean, it's 1 out of every about 310 births, a child has cerebral palsy, and it's normally not diagnosed until around 2 years old, which was what happened with Brendan, because he was a little bit tight. Like when we would sit him up, he would not like wobble down, but he was stiff and he was like, and he would fall down. But it wasn't until he was 19 months old and he couldn't walk. That was our thing. So the first thing was keeping him alive. He coded twice. His lungs weren't working. And then it was just this series of issues. They first thought he had a rare red blood cell disease. And then a few weeks later, we couldn't find his gallbladder. And then we thought it was this. And then we thought it was that. And it ultimately, eventually, it just, wound up, okay, he got an MRI. We saw what's called periventricular leukomalacia, which is what causes cerebral palsy. For him, it was in the center of his brain. It looked like a little lightning bolt. And it's interesting, when it's in the middle, that kind of affects your legs. And for him, he has spastic diplegia, which is just in his legs. He doesn't have cerebral palsy in his arms or his neck or anything. But as that periventricular leukomalacia damage goes out into different parts of the brain, then it becomes the arms are affected. Then it becomes maybe, you're nonverbal. I mean, and it goes out. I mean, we were very, very lucky because a placental abruption is a pretty critical emergency where the baby's losing oxygen. So the situation could be far more severe. So we're very, very lucky.
Yeah. Can I ask you how you as a family, do you think through that situation? The reason why I ask this question is because we had an opportunity to interview Jason Khalipa, and Jason Khalipa he's a CrossFit champion and owns a line of gyms. But he has this mentality called as many reps as possible, which is a CrossFit mentality. Right. You have a minute, as many reps as possible. But he's applied that to his whole life. And his daughter at a young age was diagnosed with leukemia. And the very first thing that him and his wife came together when they realized that this was upon them was they said, as many reps as possible. This is our focus. We have to stop everything that we're doing. We're financially okay to do so right now, but this is everything that we have to do is focused on this right now.
Right. For us, it was not quite as monumental in a moment. It was such a journey because leukemia is a diagnosis that is, you can see it under the microscope. With Brendan, we weren't sure what was going on, so it was amazing that he made it out of the NICU. And then, the first 6 months was very touch and go at home. And that was, you're constantly going back to the doctor. And that was when, maybe it's a rare red blood cell disease. Maybe it's not a gallbladder, whatever. And then he was quote unquote fine, but you're a baby, so, and like I said, unless you're very severely affected by it. So we just had our baby, and thankfully, he made it past this point. He was a little bit late to the milestones, but he was sitting up. Sure, he'd fall down. So I kept developing the company. I mean, I knew what I was doing, and my husband was there, and we had help, and we had Royce, our oldest. But it wasn't until 19 months. So I was already knee deep into development of the company. And we just, you just do what you need to do. And so I was able to kind of work early. I used to get up very, very early and stay up very, very late because it really does become all consuming when you have a child with a special need, especially a special need that you're not so sure of. I took him to one of the leading pediatric neurologists on Long Island at the time. And this child was 19 months old. And I'll never forget. And I respect this woman, but absolutely could not believe what she said. He was 19 months old and couldn't even stand up. And she said, oh, he's just late on a global delay because of his prematurity. Don't worry. One day you'll look over your shoulder and see him walking across the room. And I said, with all due respect, I completely disagree with you. So if this was your child, what would you do? And she said, I would just wait. And I said, thank you very much. And I went to get a second opinion. Dr. Murray Engel at Weill Cornell in New York, we got an MRI and boom, like this. He's like, do you see that lightning bolt? Periventricular leukomalacia. More than likely, this is cerebral palsy. Immediately, he brought in Dr. Leon Root, who has since passed away, but he practiced until he was almost 90 years old. And he was the champion of children with cerebral palsy. We were just so incredibly fortunate to be under his care until he passed away. But so, like anything, it's following your instincts, whether you have a definitive diagnosis like leukemia or you know something is wrong and you don't quite believe what these doctors are saying. I mean, our parental instinct, and I have to say, I believe a mother's intuition is a superpower, and you just got to go with it.
My wife says that all the time.
It's
she
very
says, you don't know,
true.
I'm the mother, I know.
There's just something about when something has grown inside of you. I don't know. I really am a firm believer that your maternal instinct is a superpower. And my husband, as I'm sure you are with your wife, I mean, my husband has been spectacularly supportive. If I tell him we need to go to this doctor, Brandon needs this surgery, he's like, yep, I trust you, like completely. And we just go ahead and we do it. So it was not easy to have a company in full-fledged development and then have a child diagnosed with cerebral palsy. But whereas leukemia, I mean, we're talking about life and death now. That's a whole different ballgame. With Brendan, it was getting him the right therapy and all of that. I mean, if it was a life and death situation for Brendan, everything would have stopped for sure.
So Sage Spoonfuls started with a cookbook. And initially when you set out to do it, you didn't really have kind of a grand plan. Initially it was, well, can we create the cookbook? Can we create something that might be a small line? And then you put it out into the market, you launch. Can you talk about the launch and kind of those first days? And as you launched the cookbook, you started to say, well, what's the real opportunity here? And kind of up to that point in which you had your first big box retailer that came and said, yeah, we're interested.
It was a really interesting experience. And to this day, I am the epitome of the true entrepreneur who just builds the plane as she flies it. You know, I know what needs to be done, but I don't follow an exact business plan because the world it changes too much. You just need to know what you're doing and make smart decisions. The initial idea for Sage Spoonfuls, like you said, was just to be a cookbook, and actually those little plastic jars right there that are still to this day made in the USA. So I initially thought that's what it was going to be. But I was having so much fun developing products. I mean, if you would have told me 10 years ago that manufacturing was my true passion, not, being a soap star on passions, although that was a lot of fun, I just kept going and made it more of a system. So instead of a book in jars, it wound up being 3 different kits, sort of like a good, better, best, kind of a thing. And I wanted to launch with a splash. And so at that time, there were lots and lots of these wonderful big parenting events. And I was doing my Google research about competitors and what events they went to. And there was this wonderful group called Big City Moms who wound up becoming great friends of mine to this day. And we spent $15,000 on the biggest spot. And, our designers made, all these just this wonderful booth. And it was like a 15 by 15 or a 20 by 20. We had tables set out. We had giveaways. We just made this big, big splash. And it was 10 years ago. So you didn't really hear so much the word influencers. It was bloggers, bloggers.
We didn't have any of that.
So we had so many bloggers, we had so much media, and then we were really off and running. So what I initially thought would just be a book and some baby food storage jars, because I was having so much fun, was already now these cool kits. And then because we launched and made a big splash at a time where the organic movement was really coming into New York and people were on the East Coast. It was already on the West Coast. We got so much press and so much wonderful attention from this Big City Moms event. We were in Bye Bye Baby nationwide within 5 months.
Wow.
So it was very quick. And I remember like in the middle of the night about 7 or 8 months in, like waking up, from some sort of quasi nightmare. And I said to my husband, did I just start a brand? Because I have a nationwide brand, because I have no idea what I'm doing. He's like,
well, because you went to school for communications too.
Yes, I was a soap star, I mean, my goodness, like I didn't know, but my husband, he said, look, he said, you're so creative and what you've created is getting so much wonderful attention. You were right. There was a need for this in the market. And the business stuff that you still need to learn, he's like, I'll help you. And we'll find other people to help you. We'll find mentors. But let's go with this. You can do this. Just follow your instincts. And I did. And here we are today, in our 10th year. And there have been a lot of mistakes along the way. There have been a lot of successes along the way. But it's about trusting your instincts.
So you said that as an owner and founder, there's no one more passionate than you. And I 100% agree with that. I mean, Jenny and Steph, who are here in the background, see that every day with me, at all hours of the day and night when I'm sending ideas and talking about stuff.
You drive people crazy, I'm sure, with your 2 a.m. emails.
They don't even want to
I
deal
used
with
to
me
do
most
that
days.
too.
But it's like, I have this idea. Let's do it. Right?
Yes,
like
right
wait
now.
A minute. No,
as soon as you wake up.
I'm the only one who wants to do it right now. I often break down business problems into 3 components: people, process, and technology. And so I would like to maybe spend a minute talking about how you scaled the business through these 3 components. And so I'm interested is, you said, and your husband, you quoted your husband and said that, he said, we'll get you the right people. We'll get you the ones that we can surround you with. Building teams and effective leaders and building organizations that are sustainable over the long term that's my day job. And so I'm truly passionate about that. I'm interested in knowing, as you've scaled this business, what you've looked for in people, as you've built your team, as you've identified your strengths and had to also identify what you're not good at.
Right.
And then figure out, how do I fill that gap? What have you looked for, and how have you built that team?
So right from the get-go, I knew that I wanted to remain 100% owner. I did not want to give the company away to investors. So that's challenging right there in and of itself. But people do it. In all different size companies, you can do it. It just means you have to be really creative. And
Peter Cancro, we're sponsored by Jersey Mike's. Peter Cancro, founder of bought it from Mike, who Mike Subs, one store. And I asked him this question when we had Peter on, and I said, why did you not sell the company? Why did you not take an investor?
Right.
And he said, because I knew I could work harder than everybody else, and I could retain the owner. They're a $3 billion company now. Yeah,
I mean, it's amazing. And he would have probably gotten some help in the beginning and then gotten kicked off the ship. I mean, unfortunately, this is just what happened. I also had 4 really, really little kids. And so I knew that it would take me longer to get to where I want to be, but that I could still get there. And here we are, we're 10 years in, we're getting ready to launch with Williams-Sonoma, where we in all these, and 300 stores, all Meijer stores in the Midwest. I mean, we continue to grow. We remain a top seller on Amazon. I mean, we're where we are now. We could have been there years ago, but I'm still 100% owner. Right. So getting back to your original question, it's very difficult as someone who wants to remain 100% owner and someone who is completely type A, as most entrepreneurs, probably all entrepreneurs are, giving anything, kind of delegating anything. But it just, there comes a time where you have to. And so I went slowly. I hired a consultant who had a lot of something like 25 years experience in the juvenile product industry. And she worked with me for 6 years. And, we wound up having a 3PL, a third-party logistics center. They had a lot of experience working in the juvenile product space. So I learned a lot about the business end of it, and they learned a lot from me about the creative end of it, being very creative about funding. And these days, there's so many wonderful options just from a few years ago. So it was just about, who can I learn from? And I'm doing this very slowly. And what I did was I kept everyone as a 1099 for years. I didn't bring on my first W-2 employee until 2019, I think.
Oh, so not that long ago.
And the mistake I made was putting too much trust. Whether it's a 3PL, whether it's a third-party contractor, a 1099, or a W-2 employee. And it's interesting. I'm not someone who trusts anyone but myself anyway. So it was very strange that
I can identify with that.
And yet I put so much trust in these other people. While there was a lot of good, there were a couple of holes being drilled in my boat behind me when I wasn't looking that I only found out about in early 2020. So when COVID hit, and this is a huge lesson that I learned, and that I learned the hard way, and that for any new entrepreneur or young CEO, and by young, I don't mean age, I mean experience, don't ever take your finger off the pulse of every single level of your business, because I did. I stayed in the top level, but I didn't realize the unreal amount of cash bleeds and decisions that were being made, spending our money without my approval. And so when 2020 came, our assembly team, we work with this really great group of special needs adults who puts the lids on the plastic jars because they come from the US, so the components come in separately. And we've been working with them for 7 or 8 years. And I had never met them. And unfortunately, even though they were a business, they were considered a school. Right. So when COVID hit, they were not allowed to work. And so someone had to do the assembly. I mean, we had massive amounts of orders for these things. And then the other glass jars, those come in ready. But the other green glass jars also needed to have the lids put on and to be built into kits. And we had something like an $80,000 order, like for Amazon, for this 1 week. And it was like 1,000 kits or something that needed to be put together. And I had no one to do it. And I was like, well,
because they couldn't come to work.
They couldn't come to work. The fulfillment team, the guys in the warehouse could stay open, but somebody needed to put this stuff together. And I said, well, I'll do it.
You have 4 kids?
I was like, well, but what was interesting is that my husband, who is in tech, who always traveled, then all of a sudden couldn't travel. So the roles reversed. He worked from home and I was on the road. To get those kits put together, I was gone for 10 days.
Wow.
But when I walked into that overflow warehouse, I saw 3 stories high of boxes that had been ordered from back in 2015 and 2017 that were worth, there was probably $75,000 of overordered boxes. There was this and there was that and there was that, and it was my fault. And I was like, wow, this is where the money's going. It was part of the problem. You know what I'm saying? Part of the problem. So, I mean, it took me 3 years to go through those boxes that were ordered in 2015 and 2017. Wow. And that was it's no one's fault but my own. I took my finger off every level. And so I was going down there. I went down there every single week. I made 104 trips from Boston to Trenton, New Jersey between April 2nd of 2020 and July 6th of this year.
Wow.
And I wound up moving 3PLs because there was a lot of overspending. Things I trusted and I didn't realize. I mean, we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars spent that didn't need to be. And so it's my fault.
We talk about accountability.
It's all my fault.
Ownership. And you know what I appreciate so much, your perspective on that, because it's one of the most critical factors of leadership that so many people don't understand. And they're so quick, to say, well, somebody did that. You're right. Yeah, somebody did it. But if you're in charge,
the buck stops with you. So when we recently moved out of our old 3PL, and I spent a couple of hours and went through all of our invoices from 2013 through now, and angry, really angry at myself, really angry at myself. The amount of overcharging that I allowed to happen just because I trusted, and just because all I had to do was just look a little deeper.
Yeah.
It wasn't the consultant's, it wasn't her job. Of course the 3PL gives them more money. If it was just more storage, they're going to order as many boxes. I was so angry at myself. But it's done.
You gotta
know
move
what
on.
I'm saying? You have to move on. But I mean,
Some-
it was 8 years, 9 years of overspending. And so it's my fault. I gave them the power to do it. And that was the biggest mistake. So now everything has to go through me. We just moved to a new 3PL literally July 7th of this year. They are amazing. And as much as I love and trust them, there is a very different level. And I'm looking at everything, combing through everything. And I really hate to say it, as even in 2022, people see you as a female and they feel they can take advantage of you. And I actually let it happen. For as someone who's as sharp and smart as I am, I let myself get taken advantage of.
So they call it trust but verify.
Yeah.
And that's what we used to say in the military. Trust but verify.
Yeah. My husband always loves to put a positive spin on things. So he's like, well, we can't go back now and change anything.
Yeah,
he
right.
said, so you got your MBA. We're not going to business school. I'm
That's
like,
right.
I like the way you put that. I like the way you put that.
Well, let's talk about process.
Yes.
Because as you said, you had no experience in manufacturing. I mean, there's so many components of this too. You have production, you have packaging, you have marketing, distribution, sales. There's so many different components of creating this. You also talked about the concept in some financing, and it kind of called a factor.
Yes.
Which I thought was really interesting. And I wanted you to explain that, because I think that's something we haven't talked about at all, and something that a lot of people don't know about. So can you talk about this concept of what a factor is, how you used it, and then also what it's been like to go into these various components of being in this, the process of actually producing a manufactured good?
Absolutely. Let's do part one of this answer about the manufacturing. And
I
then
tend
part
to ask
two,
very broad questions.
and I tend to digress. So I am, for myself, part one-ing and part twoing this. So part one, about the manufacturing. So while I didn't have all the knowledge in the world about business, I was just a sponge about manufacturing. I loved it so much. And so I had this idea, now who's going to make these jars? I came from NBC. I don't know how to make something. So I just spent hundreds of hours of research. And I wanted to make as many products as possible in the US. How do you make anything anywhere, let alone in the United States? So I found this factory and I just cold called them. And by unbelievable luck, I wound up getting the head of engineering on the phone on his lunch break. And his name is David Gottler, and he long since retired. But David must have heard something in my voice or was just in a good mood. I don't know. But he spent 45 minutes on the phone talking to me about plastics. And he probably could not believe that this gal on the other end of the phone was so passionate about glass and plastic as he was. And he wound up helping facilitate a meeting with myself and the heads of the factory. So I walked into a boardroom of men, the only woman, and I went in there and I pitched my idea, because factories they don't just say like, oh, cool, you want to make this? Sure, we'll make it. Like, there's a whole process.
Oh, yeah.
And so that was my first meeting. I pitched to them, and they wound up being they loved my passion. They loved my idea. They also saw the hole in the market, and we worked with them for 8 years. They were our primary supplier for the glass and the plastic jars. And then as we moved and expanded, I learned about other ways to find factories. And dealing with China, dealing with Korea, dealing with factories in India. Initially it felt very intimidating. But I said to myself, these are just people really far away, and these documents are all in a language I can't understand. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to ask them to just send the English version. Like, let's just figure it out. So between video meetings and pictures and a little bit of charades, you figure it out. Almost everyone in the factory speaks English, certainly the sales reps. And we just had a great time. The tough glass jars right there that have the little fruit dots on the top of the lid. Those took about 2 years to develop. You learn about, I wanted the very best product testing. And so I found the very best lab, and everyone's teaching, and I was a sponge. So I reached out to these factories myself, and still to this day, I don't have a rep. I deal with China directly. I deal with Korea, Vietnam, and our factories abroad in India and the US all myself because I really enjoy it. And right off the bat, there are ways you can get taken advantage of,
right,
especially as a female. So something I do want to share is that when I hear people, male or female, any entrepreneur who says, oh my gosh, I spent my life savings on this first order and the container came in and everything was wrong. I mean, there's ways to avoid that. You need to get samples all along the way. You need to have written, agreed upon samples. And then you need a master case pack off the line. Before it's going to ship, you never pay them in full.
Right.
Maximum 60% down, 40%, before it leaves. I always go for, you try to do a 50-50, whatever. You either 50-50, 60-40 or 70-30, but never 100%. Because that way they're not going to get paid.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So it breaks my heart. Like you always need to get your sample off the line. You always need to get everything quality tested. There's so many different regulations for every country. The United States has, of course, the fewest regulations. But so we actually test to the highest standards for every country. So we don't clip our own wings. We just test for everything. So like with those squeeze pouches over there, the baby food reusable pouches, the factory, they kept making a mistake and failing the test. And I said, no, you got to do it over and over and over again until it's right. And then you also surprise them. You have a team of inspectors show up, who inspects it and then retests it. There's lots of ways you can protect yourself. So as we are, manufacturing goods and starting to expand the line, of course you need more funding. And I felt very blessed. We had a lot of investors and still do wanting to work with us. And it just never felt right. Again, this intuition. I kept saying to myself, most people take on investors. Why does this feel so wrong? I can't even tell you how many meetings I had with investors. And I didn't even get to the point where I wanted to pitch because I didn't want to do it. It just didn't feel right. So I thought there's got to be a better way. I talked to the SBA. I was like, it's not enough. I met with the bank talking about lines of credit. And I was like, it's not right either. And then all of a sudden, I looked through my cards. When you go to these various trade shows, you have like 10,000 cards. And I was like, I have all these cards. I remember meeting these guys, the various factors. It's like, what is that? So I called my accountant and she was like, I'm not 100% sure. And I know they all work differently. And so I just started having meetings. Some of their terms, so they all work differently. So a factor, just let me say what it is. A factor is someone who can help, who will own your receivables, who will pay you early. So for example, our factor owns our Amazon and our Target receivables, our two biggest accounts. So rather than us, holding the bag for 6 months, the 3 months to produce, letting all this money out, right? The 3 months to produce the product, then it's got to come to us, then we have to sell it. And then, Target and Amazon and accounts like that have 90 to 120 day terms. You're waiting for your money for forever.
That's an eternity.
It's an eternity for any size company. So what the factor does for us, for example, we get our orders from Amazon or from Target on a Monday. We ship it by a Thursday or Friday. I upload the invoices. They pay us. Amazon pays them.
So they're fronting you.
They're basically fronting us.
Got it.
Now, it can work many different ways. What I like so much about our factors is that they've been in business for 25 years. It's, a father and two sons at the helm, and it's very straightforward. They get X amount off the Target invoice. Yep. They get X amount off the Amazon invoice, no matter if Amazon or Target pays on time or not. Now, not every factor works that way. There was one I spoke to who was like, it's 0.03 every day. It's late. And I was like, I don't understand. Like if I don't understand it and I got to be at the helm and this involves my money,
right?
Having learned from the box situation, I was like, no. So I wound up going with what was most streamlined. And they also offer purchase order financing, which is fantastic. Yeah. there's just so many ways. You don't have to say no. So, for example, we have this wonderful opportunity to expand into 350 stores.
That's it?
In the Midwest. Well, this is one particular retailer,
That's a
and
tremendous opportunity.
but these opening orders are huge, and so they will own the purchase order. So they will help fund. No, they will fund the products so that they can get made.
Right.
Because, we're talking now about multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars of
That's a lot-
opening
that's a lot
orders,
of
and
product.
when you launch in Walmart, I mean, these are $1 million purchase orders. Like, that's a lot of product. So, you can do purchase order financing. There's also a wonderful platform we just found called Kick Further, whereas Kickstarter is for brand new businesses and all different kinds of people have Kickstarter for many different reasons, and it's open to the public. Kick Further is a closed group of already vetted investors for companies that are making $150,000 in revenue or more, and they fund your inventory. And so they hold the bag versus you, and you don't start paying them back until you receive the inventory. I mean, there are so many different options out there, and we've utilized everything from expensive online loans, many, many years ago, where the interest rate is crazy, but you get the money like yesterday.
45% interest rate.
Exactly. To now we have our factor for our two biggest accounts, and we've utilized Kick Further to help us keep inventory rolling because the supply chain issues are such a hot mess. We lost over $1 million in revenue in the past 12 months because a container would come in, it would sell out. And then we waited for over 3 months for one of our containers of our top sellers. And then you lose your rank and you lose your jam on Amazon. You lose that, and the algorithm hates you. And it's like, the most important thing with supply chain is, for any physical product based company, I mean, whether you're small, medium, or large, is inventory. And everyone has had issues with inventory. So I have personally gotten really creative funding wise to make sure that we don't run out of products so we can expand. Like I said, we're expanding to all these different marketplaces like Williams Sonoma, just launched in Pottery Barn Kids, want to expand on Amazon, want to bring in more for Target, having all these in-store programs. Now we've expanded into the grocery market. We're with UNFI. I mean, you need to have your inventory, because if you can't supply the inventory, you lose those accounts, and that's awful. And I really want entrepreneurs to know that you may need an investor, but you don't always. There's so many options now.
Yeah, I think a lot of what you've just thrown out here, I mean, we've never talked about this. And we've had a number of entrepreneurs on who've built their own businesses, and never have we talked about these options.
Yeah, I mean, it's especially for physical product-based companies, right? I mean, so kickfurther.com, I highly recommend if you're making $150,000. If you have a physical product-based company and you're making $150,000 in revenue per year or more. I mean, there are companies on there that I look up to, that I admire, and that was really what made me want to work with them, because I thought, okay, this is very interesting. These companies that are way larger than we are in the same space in the juvenile marketplace. I'm like, okay, this is very interesting. This is how they're doing it.
Yeah.
And with a factor, because there are so many different ways a factor can work. I mean, look, with anything you're doing financially, you have to be so careful, but just make sure if you do take on a factor that you are really, really secure on the terms and you like the people. And I recommend going with a factor who's very streamlined, who also offers purchase order financing, because then you already have a relationship and then you don't have to go somewhere else. Right. But there's just so many options. You don't have to say no to big orders because there's options.
I want to ask about technology, the third component.
Okay.
E-commerce.
Yes.
Is what I'm very interested in.
Mm-hmm.
How have you approached the e-commerce market versus the big box retailer market?
So we have had a really strong foothold or footprint in the e-commerce market since day one. Interestingly enough, feeding products for babies, for kids, for toddlers sells more online than in store. For example, if you're going to go buy a stroller or a car seat, more than likely you're going to want to go in store and see it and feel it and physically touch it. But it's different for this category. So for us, when 2020 hit, it was feast or famine for companies. Either you were really having a difficult time or your sales were up exponentially. And for us, and we felt so grateful, sales were up 300% because families were staying home, making their own food for their kids and families. And we already had a really strong footprint in e-commerce.
Right.
We were with, Target.com, Walmart.com, Amazon, right from the beginning. But that is not in my wheelhouse. Like, I don't understand that. So that really that takes people who know what they're doing, especially with like the EDI, the electronic data interface, where the computers talk to each other. So you can go into the portal, the back end of, let's say, Target's portal, and you can see the purchase orders, but you can't ship them unless the EDI is connected. And you do it that way. I'm actually in EDI hell at the moment because we just moved from one warehouse to another. And the way the initial warehouse did our EDI setups, and again, it's my problem because I didn't ask, paid way too much money for these setups, and they were done in a way where we couldn't take them with us.
When you switched the...
So we should have my own fault, but now I know. But we have to start all over again because now everything's in the cloud. Everything is modern. And so the EDI package we have now, I don't see us moving to another 3PL anytime soon, but it's just like turning the dial. Right. You know what I'm saying? But now we're starting all over again. And so I'm needing to learn, working with this team who knows so much. We have like all these weeks and weeks and weeks of backed up orders from these huge retailers that we have prepped and ready to go, but we can't ship until all the connections are made. It's crazy. There's so much. But as far as the tech end goes for e-commerce, everything is EDI, and you need people who know what they're doing, especially with Amazon. Oh my goodness, the chargebacks. You put your label on slightly askew. That's $100. That is not something you can hire for character and they can teach the trade later. You need to the character almost doesn't matter as long as they really know what they're doing. Tech has its own kind of thing.
Well, I say that I do sometimes when I talk about that, I do quantify things like engineering, where I'm like, there's a lot of things we can train you for, but if we need to do software engineering and you don't understand software engineering, probably we're not going to be able to make this happen.
Exactly.
When you sat down and spoke with Juliette Hahn, you said, quote, try to keep your failures as inexpensive as possible. Try to keep your failures as inexpensive as possible. You also spoke about fear, and you talked about fear of failure, fear of loss, fear of not achieving your dreams. We've had a lot of conversations about fear and overcoming what I call limiting beliefs, those things, what Colin Bevan in episode 15 talked about, these limiting beliefs, the things that prevent you from taking action. How do you combat these fears?
So I want to quickly touch on the first thing you said, which is try to keep your mistakes as inexpensive as possible. So I made some very expensive mistakes in the beginning. And look, we all have to learn in life, and some lessons we have to learn the hard way, and some lessons...
Tell my daughter this every day.
And some lessons we don't. And this is one that nobody needs to learn the hard way. So, like I said, 5 months out of the gate, we launched in Bye Bye Baby nationwide. So what do you need for that? You need packaging. Mm-hmm. So we have this meeting set up with Bye Bye Baby. My designers and I designed this whole suite of packaging for the line that we're in love with. We spent $35,000 on all the boxes because we're like, this packaging is the bomb.
I designed all of it.
It's amazing. We got no one's eyeballs on it except for us. Of course, we love the packaging. So we're in the Bye Bye Baby meeting. And when you're in a meeting with a big box retailer, like it's a boardroom, you get to go in 10 minutes before. You set up your thing and you do your thing.
It's like the Shark Tank.
Similar, but you're sitting down.
Right.
And they're not in front of you, frightening. They're just around the boardroom, also mildly intimidating. So, I mean, we're in there for 2 hours talking. It was like our buyer, who's still our buyer to this day, this sales rep group who I never should have hired, who absolutely royally screwed us. But again, it falls to me, learn a lesson the hard way, and some other bigwigs at Bye Bye Baby. Going through a stack of very difficult business terms. Okay, I got it. No problem. And she said to me, and we laugh about this to this day, she said, okay, I love you. I love your product. I hate your packaging. And I was a grown woman in a meeting with Bye Bye Baby, and I started to cry. Oh, no. I cried ugly tears in my meeting of Bye Bye Baby. And then we all laughed because you don't spend $35,000 on a suite of packaging before a buyer has had their eyeballs on it. You make mock-ups because people have tweaks and things they don't like. So I was in my head, I was like, oh my God, I have to find another $35,000 because now they want to, I mean, you don't want to not launch in Bye Bye Baby. So we just, oh my gosh, we used those ugly boxes for online orders and just scraped and scrapped another $35,000 together for boxes that they had their eyeballs on and that they gave approval. So that, please don't ever put your money into a whole suite of boxes without getting other people's eyeballs on them. It's very easy to make mock-ups. Buyers are used to seeing mock-ups. That to me is the most expensive, stupid mistake I ever made. But part 2 of your question was, I know it was passion-based. Can you repeat to me?
Yes, of course. How do you overcome these fears of failure, of loss, of not achieving your dreams?
Okay, so failure, you have to fall in love with failure as an entrepreneur. You just can't make the same mistake twice. You know what I'm saying? You have to fall in love with failure because failure is how we learn. I sure as hell didn't spend another $35,000 on another suite of packaging without getting eyeball. You know, like we grow and we learn from our mistakes, but we have to fail fast and move on. So failure is something we just need to fall in love with and embrace. The part of like losing, we all get deflated, right? As entrepreneurs, like the wind out of your sails. I mean,
sometimes multiple times a day.
I was just going to say it's a loop-de-loop roller coaster every single day. I mean, my kids are used to it now, but like, oh my gosh, I'll be like flying high, maybe at noon and then like crying at 3 p.m. and then like, hey guys, it all worked out. By dinner time, they're like, Mom, you are a riot. You can get through it when you believe in what you're doing. I believe in myself and my product so deeply that these little kerfuffles that happen, it's like, And I'm like, I know what I'm doing. I can fix this. So it's just like, but you fix it. I trust myself so much to fix any problem that come my way. And that's what you need to have as an entrepreneur. You're going to have problems every single day. Mm-hmm. But just trust in yourself that you're going to be able to find the solution, whether you know the answer or whether you're going to find someone who's going to help you find the answer. There's never going to be a day without problems. And there's also never going to be a day without a little success. So you just need to be okay with both and just like put your harness on and ride the roller coaster.
It's purpose. If you can fall back on that purpose, why am I doing this? What drives me? Then it helps you to continue to get back on that train.
And the trust in yourself that you can get through it. Because without that is what can derail the whole train. Mm-hmm. If you allow those daily problems, some are huge, some are small, but if you allow them to derail you and knock the wind out of you, that becomes a problem. Because when there's problems every day, which there are, you start to get weaker and weaker and weaker, whereas your problems can make you stronger and stronger and stronger. And you're like, you know what? We did this over here and that really worked. Let's do a modified version of that over here and we can fix it. But that's what's helped me get through, just constant punches to the throat. Either from my kids or from my business or from life. We all get punched in the throat like every day.
Can I ask you about daytime TV?
Of course.
The first passion The passions before the passion.
Passions before the passion.
You spent 10 years on NBC's Passions. You played Gwen Hotchkiss. Why get into daytime? I mean, what was it about getting into it that you loved? Because you said it was your true first passion.
So this is interesting. So because it was like the family business, because my mother was in daytime forever, and she was already on TV but I was 5 years old. I mean, she was already on for a long time. So it was very intriguing, and I love to perform, and I love being in front of the camera, and it just felt like this natural family business. And so when the opportunity arose for this part for Gwen Hotchkiss, it just seemed like a no-brainer. And it was myself and a couple of other women who tried out for the part. I think I was 21, just out of college. And I flew out to LA by myself. And I absolutely bombed so they normally give you 2 chances. You have a scene. You know what I'm saying? You're out there, full hair and makeup, and you're doing a scene. And I bombed the first 2 times. And I'll never forget this. I looked into the camera because the camera is connected to the booth, and I said, I know you don't normally give people 3 chances, but I can do a lot better, and I'm just asking for one more chance. And I absolutely crushed it the 3rd time. Again, different industry, belief in yourself. So I love to perform. But as time went on, and I mean, we were all so young. We were between 19 years old and like 25. It was the most fun ever. We were on the CBS Radford lot at the time. Will and Grace was being filmed there. That 70s show, Seinfeld. We were all in the commissary together with like Kramer getting cheeseburgers. I mean, it was amazing. There was one summer where Snoop Dogg, Nate Dogg, and Warren G did a private concert for like 1,000 of us just on the lot. It remains one of my husband's my favorite moments of all time. We had so much fun. But look, as time went on, money is wonderful, but I just wasn't fulfilled. Yeah. And so had the show not gone down, been canceled, I would have stayed forever because it was a lot of fun and the money was great. But there was a piece of my soul. I was just like, I want to give back to the community in some way. So the show ending was a good thing for me. It was a way that I was forced to pivot.
You mentioned your husband. You've been together since you were kids.
So we've known each other since we were kids. We have our first grade class picture. He's standing behind me. We're both like 7 years old. But we did not start dating until we were something like 27. I was engaged to someone before him. When we first got together, we were looking through, I mean, this was before digital photos, like my box of like 3x5s.
The photo album.
And we found these pictures that I had taken of like us in a limo together, like at a prom with like different dates and stuff. It just, so we've known each other forever. But we didn't start dating until we were in our late 20s. And I mean, we were engaged within like 6 or 8 months or something.
You balance a lot in your day between the kids, the business, being married. You said that you have to temper your expectations and that you can't, if you used to be able to achieve 50 things in a day and now it's 5. And this is something that, I asked this question out of my own personal, wonder, because I struggle with this tremendously. Right. Like I wake up at, 4:30 in the morning and I have my list of things that I made the night before at midnight when I went to bed. And inevitably by the end of the day, I start to realize I'm not going to get all this done. And then you start to get frustrated and it's like, okay, well, what now I have to, try to reprioritize this. And I always feel like you're behind. You
do always feel like you're behind. And then, with 4 kids, 2 dogs, a horse and a husband, there's a lot of responsibility.
All vying to be top of the priority.
I need to keep everybody alive, fed, and everyone needing attention. So a few years ago, I mean, look, we all feel like multitasking is the jam. Like multitasking, we can do it all at the same time. But the truth is you can't.
Yeah.
You can do it all, but not all at the same time. Because I remember just running myself ragged for years, but only 30% of everything was getting done. So like I wasn't getting anywhere. I was on this treadmill and I wasn't getting anywhere. So I realized, I'm going to have to segment my day. And I think as much as you can, and of course life throws us surprises, especially with kids, dogs, horses, living things. I mean, but as much as you can to segment your day. And instead of having 30 things on your to-do list, I have 5 critical work tasks and 5 critical home tasks that must get done. So if I get off the rails, if the day takes me off the rails, I look back at my list. Okay, wait a second. Okay, what's on the home thing that I haven't done yet? Brendan needs to be signed up for his archery class. Okay, I can do that in 2 seconds. Okay, that email, let me do it. But critical things, not making the bed and folding laundry, the permission slips that don't get signed, right? 5 critical things for work that are really going to move the needle, and 5 critical things that are going to keep your home at least somewhat running smoothly. And so when you feel like you're getting lost, you just go back to that list. And so at the end of the day, it's only 5 things, but it's 5 important things. You do your brain dump, and then you just start ticking off, what absolutely has to be done tomorrow. Because not everything has to be done on Monday. Some things can wait till Wednesday and some things can wait till Friday. Yeah. Then you add to the list, and some things you thought, it's just, so it's, for me, it's segmenting the day. And when mom is working. And I'm lucky now because my kids are a little bit older. And when they were younger, I was exceptionally lucky that I was able to afford childcare. When Brendan was sick and I was developing the company, I did not want anybody in my house for 2 years. So I segmented my time in a different way. I worked when they were sleeping, and that was it. So, no matter if you have childcare or not, there is a way you can do it. There is a way you can do it. Now that they're older, it's much, much easier. And I say to them, look, this is very, very important. And I need you to give me until 12 to get this done. So it's segmenting.
You have 4 top lessons that you've put out there in the world. And I'm going to ask you about them.
Okay.
All right. And I'll throw it out.
Okay.
And then you give me your top line. This is what it means.
Okay.
Okay. The first one, protect your idea.
Mm-hmm. You got to protect your idea because none of us are reinventing the wheel anymore. And with the technology that there is these days, people can copy you overnight. So protect your idea until it's out there. Your factories will give your idea to another company. Those squeezy pouches, I have the design patent. I own the design patent, but our own factory gave the design to another company. And now about 5 other companies are using my design. So now we have the patent. We can call ourselves the original. Mm-hmm. But you need to keep it to yourself, launch, land, and expand as fast as you can because it will happen. And you know what about copying? Unless they got there ahead of you, if nobody wants to copy you, you kind of suck.
Yeah.
That's my thought about copying. Because if people want to copy you, you're doing something right.
Yeah.
Just do it faster.
Yeah, you have to ask yourself, do people actually want this then?
Yeah. Yeah. So people wanting to copy you is a huge compliment. You just got to get there before they do.
Yeah. Eventually it's going to happen. Okay. The second one.
Okay.
Do your homework.
You have to do your homework. So you have to do your homework and then you have to look away from it. Because you have to know what's out there. Because if you don't know what's out there, you could be doing something someone else is already doing. I mean, I did ridiculous amounts of homework. And every time I want to launch a new product, homework. And then blinders on. Now we're doing what we're going to do. Because you never want to lose your voice as a brand. You don't want to be looking so much at what the competition is doing that you start to sound like them just because you're knee deep in their Amazon listings, or you're looking at their social media. Like, you need to know what they're doing. Then you need to put it away and do your own thing informed.
3, be ready to make mistakes.
Be ready to make mistakes, make peace with it. No way you're going to get through a day without making mistakes. Just learn from them. You know, if something is the Titanic, don't hang on to it and go down with it. Stop it, change it, and move on. Fast. Don't be afraid of mistakes, but learn fast and move on.
Last one, don't wait.
Don't wait. Don't wait. There's no perfect time. You're never going to have enough money. You're never going to have, enough experience, enough knowledge, the right this, the right that. Just do it. Do it. Plant your seeds and get started, because there are 100 people behind you with the same idea. Just start, because here we are like 10 years in, and I'm still learning every day. There's never a perfect time. So just start.
Yeah, and then iterate on it and see what happens.
Build the plane as you fly.
Yeah. I want to ask you about what's next. The company has grown 100% year on year for multiple years in a row. You've been doing over 7 figures 5 years in a row. But the U.S. here, and we've just underwent and are still experiencing a major baby formula shortage, supply chain issues. Abbott Labs closed twice. And the White House launched Operation Fly Formula, which is like normally you see the pictures of the U.S. dropping aid in other countries, and here we are dropping aid in our own country. In July, 30% of the shelves were bare. Recent data from last week shows it's down to about 20%, but the end of this is not expected until later on this year, if not into early next year. What's next for the industry in your mind, and what's next for the company?
I actually don't even think it's just our industry. I think it's manufacturing and products in general. It's very difficult right now, because not only is there supply chain issues, like the general public was made very aware of supply chain issues. I think it was last fall, but it had already been happening since March of 2021. And it's every single link in the supply chain is broken. Every single link, from the raw material sources abroad to not enough truckers here in our country to bring things. I mean, our ports aren't optimized for all this congestion. The largest shipping company, container shipping company, made in the first quarter of 2022 more money than they had made in 7 years.
Really?
Because shipping costs were up 5 to 6x. So what used to cost us, let's say $4,000 or $5,000 to bring in a container, is now between $20,000 and $22,000.
That it's grown that much.
That much. It's gone down now slightly. But so you've got your raw materials that cost more. You've got then the factories are costing more as a result. Everything's taking longer. Now you also have the vessels are tremendously more expensive, and you have the Trump import taxes. I don't care who you vote for. This has been an enormous problem. I'm a huge believer in making things in the United States. We've been making our plastic jars in the US since day one. But these import taxes that were put on these products coming in from China were meant to hurt China. They're hurting the United States businesses. So instead of a 7% import tax, I'm now paying 30% on top of 5x more expensive shipping. That hurts me as a small American business owner. We have to pass on. I mean, this is a large problem and a large reason there's inflation. And so people will, because we're not raising prices, companies aren't raising prices for fun. Right. They're raising prices at the bare minimum just so everyone can stay alive. And so people will say, well, Liza, just make everything in the US. Boy, do I wish we could. So I called every single glass factory in the United States and was told, we cannot even talk to you until the end of 2023.
Because they're busy.
Which is It's wonderful that they're busy. But these import taxes, we're being slammed because we're not working with US-based factories. We're trying to work with US-based factories, and there's no opportunity. Right. And we're still being slammed. This is a really, really big problem.
you have to decide too now, like, what are you going to do? Are you going to squeeze your margin and reduce your margin, or up your price and pass it off to the consumer?
We have, and it's also very difficult because when you're with big retailers like Target and Walmart stuff, they're not interested.
Yeah,
and
they don't.
They care about their margins. So we're moving as much production out of China as possible. What we can't get made in the U.S., we're moving over to other countries like Vietnam and India and Korea, because the import tax is just China. But whatever your politics are, what's been happening now has been hurting American businesses, and a very big cause of inflation. People don't understand it's coming from the raw materials, the enormous vessel charges, and the import taxes, and labor shortages, the formula factories, and COVID, and this and that and that. There is no one solution when every single link in the chain is broken. Yeah. So for us, what's next for us? Moving as much as we can to the U.S. and moving as much as we can out of China. I work with multiple freight forwarders now, and freight forwarders are the ones who will pick up your goods from the factories abroad and bring them in to see. I'm kind of testing people to see who can get things in faster. We've had to air freight stuff in, which actually leaves us at like almost no margin because it's so expensive.
So much more expensive.
The cost of losing the business and losing, let's say, your Amazon ranking is more expensive than going out of stock. So it's difficult. We just can't. What's next for us is we continue to pivot. We continue to make the best quality products in ways where we can still make our margin. It is business after all, but still provide the consumer with a high quality product at a reasonable price, because everyone's hurting now. So it's just, I feel like my creativity has been pushed to the absolute limit, and it's kind of fun when you have these ideas. Wait, I think I can do this.
We got to find a solution. I mean, you can't just sit here and say, "Oh, well, it is what it is." It's going to resolve itself. It's not. You have to do something.
You have to do something. You have to do something, and it was pretty bad the past 12 months. I mean, the last holiday season, shelves were bare. Yeah. And when we're talking about something that's such a necessity like baby formula, that is not something that can wait.
Yeah, we actually just had a conversation yesterday with my wife where I said, do we need to start, because I'd seen a news report about it, and I said, do we need to start once a week, once every 2 weeks, going and buying formula and stockpiling it because we're going to have the baby in October?
Right. And you don't know what the situation is going to be, and then of course there's this whole other mom shaming thing that goes on. Oh, well then just breastfeed. Well, it just doesn't work that way. First of all, no one should be shaming anyone. And if you have a toddler and you stop breastfeeding and the toddler needs formula, you don't just all of a sudden produce milk again. And if you've already weaned your baby, and it doesn't work for everyone. And we're all just trying to do the best for our children, and no one should be shaming anybody. This is a big problem. Mm-hmm. This is a big problem. And, maybe you should start stockpiling. I hope
I think that's the decision we made.
Formula is the new toilet paper,
That's the decision we made.
Yeah.
Liza, as we close out, the Jedburghs had to do 3 things every day to be successful. Foundations. So call them foundations, you can call them habits. They had to be able to shoot, they had to be able to move, and they had to be able to communicate. Core tasks. If they did these things with the utmost precision, they could actually then focus their attention on more complex things that came their way, complex challenges to find solutions to. What are the 3 things that you do every day in your world to set the conditions for success?
So the 3 things that I do, the first thing is I am very committed to my critical task list. Like that, the 5 things for home, the 5 things for work. I do not veer from that, because if I veer from that and those things don't get done, I am not going to reach my goals for my family or for my business. When I am scared of something, I'm a big believer. There's some kind of saying that goes, what would you do if you had 20 seconds of wild courage, just courage that you've never had before? If I have to email someone that's maybe a little bit intimidating, if I need to make a decision, I actually set my kitchen timer for 20 seconds and I send that email and I do it and I put myself on the clock. And the third thing is, and this is hard for parents, working parents, especially in the evenings. When my children want to spend time with me, that phone is gone. Because the work will always be there, but those kids will not. And I do not want their picture of their mother to be of her in bed with her phone in her face when they want to cuddle or watch a movie or get a back rub or whatever. So I don't know if that answered your question, but those are kind of my 3 non-negotiables.
It absolutely does. Stay committed to the critical task list. Second one, take the 20 seconds of wild courage and do that thing that you would do if there was no repercussion.
Right.
I love that one. I absolutely love that one because I tell myself that all the time.
Yeah.
Especially in doing this, because it's like, oh, I want to interview this person. I want to talk to that person. And you put it in your head. They'll never talk to me. And it's like, well,
take 20 seconds
they
and
will.
send the email. I mean, it's always a no. It could be a yes.
It's a no right now.
It's a no until you ask.
Until you ask. And then the third one, spend time with the kids and put the phone away. Yeah, this is a big one, and it's one that my wife's reminding me about every day. So all 3 of yours resonate very strongly with me, and I think that they're absolutely amazing.
Thank you.
We talk a lot on the podcast about these 9 characteristics of elite performance that special operations forces use to select and assess talent, and if you apply them to any successful person, any Jedburgh, as you will, it's the character that they live by that allows them to bounce back from failure, be successful, drive resiliency, adaptability, humility, integrity, curiosity, team ability, effective intelligence, and emotional strength. We've talked about all of these today in some form or fashion because elite performers exhibit all of these, not at the same time, but different combinations of them based on the situation that they're in. At the end of these conversations, I take one and I think about our conversation that we had here, and I think about what defines you. And for me, certainly all of these apply to everything you've talked about and everything you're doing every day, but I really think about curiosity. Because you've talked so much about creativity, you've talked about the drive, just doing it, but it all comes back to this ability to be curious, to go find the answer, find the solution, challenge the status quo. You identified this gap in a major market. I mean, this is not a niche product. This is a mainstream market that you've identified this gap in. You knew that it wasn't what you did in your career on television, and that it would require a pivot, and you had to educate and train yourself and find a way to be successful. The options that you spoke about here in the last couple of hours regarding financing are some of the most fascinating options I've ever heard, not only here on the podcast, but also in business. And I already have a list of people that after this, I'm going to ask you if you'll talk to them because they're asking me these questions.
I'm happy to help because it's important to know what your options are.
But it all comes down to curiosity and not be willing to sit here and say that there can't be a better solution. There can't be a better way to do this. Right. And now, as you talked about where the industry's going, what's going to happen next, how do you pivot the business? You're not sitting back and saying that, well, it'll figure itself out. You're finding solutions. You're learning more, finding ways to challenge what's happening today to be successful in the future. And you have overcome so much in your life. And that is an absolute testament to these characteristics that you display every day. It's truly been an honor to sit here with you, tell your story, share your lessons. I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Well, Fran, thank you so much. It's been wonderful speaking with you. Thank you.
American Jedburghs went out to form the foundation of the United States Special Forces and the Special Activities Directorate of the Central Intelligence Agency. Thanks for listening to the Jedburgh Podcast. I'm your creator and host, Fran Racioppi. Join us next week for a new episode on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Check us out on YouTube for full episodes, highlights, and other behind-the-scenes content. If you like what you heard, give us a like and leave a review. Follow me, Fran Racioppi, Talent War Group, and our sponsor Jersey Mike Subs on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. Send your comments and inquiries to media@talentwargroup.com. As former members of Special Operations Forces, the Jedburgh Podcast and Talent War Group contribute a percentage of all profits to the Special Operations Warrior Foundation, supporting the families of our fallen warriors. Thanks for joining us on this episode. How you prepare today determines success tomorrow.